Hi, I'm Justin Edwards from UCD, and I'll be presenting some work that I did alongside Chris Jansen, Sandy Gould, and my supervisor Ben Cowan that I presented at CUI 2021. Let's start by looking forward into the future of CUIs. Right now, assistants like Siri and Alexa are passive. They're reactive. They sit on your kitchen table or in your pocket, waiting to be addressed and interacted with. A perfect assistant would be able to interact proactively, jumping in at just the right time to say just the right thing when you needed it. The eyes-free, hands-free benefits of CUIs that we've been touting for years would be realized to a much greater extent with these sorts of proactive agents. Some work, like that of Cha and colleagues, has begun looking at this topic, using sensors to model the sorts of tasks that people might be engaged in when a proactive agent is present. But what does this sort of spoken interruption sound like? This topic hasn't been well studied. Human interruptions of human activities. In order to give proactive agent designers a foothold, I decided to elicit these sorts of spoken interruptions of ongoing tasks using an online paradigm. My paradigm looked like this, built around the game Tetris. Tetris is a task that involves a lot of decision making as well as visual attention on the part of the player, not unlike driving or cooking, but more easily represented on a computer screen than those tasks. I decided to recruit crowd workers, and I told them that they would be matched with an online partner who would be playing the game Tetris. I told them that they would intermittently have to interrupt their partner with spoken questions like, "How's the weather?" or "What's your favorite color?" In reality, I used pre-recorded videos like this to represent the game Tetris. That way the games were controlled for. Every participant saw the exact same Tetris gameplay in action. Keep in mind, I'm interested in what people say and how they say it when interrupting somebody. I'm not so interested in how somebody plays the game Tetris. I told participants after each question, their partner would be asked to rate how disruptive they were and how well timed the interruption was, and I told them that they would get a final score that would earn them a bonus prize in order to increase engagement based on some recent work by Landesberger and colleagues. Following that work, I also marked half of my trials as urgent, and I indicated that those scores would count more towards their final score. So what did I hope to find out? So based on those papers by Landesberger and colleagues, as well as some other multitasking work, like that of Brumby and colleagues at UCL, we predicted that urgency would have an effect on the timing of interruptions. Hypotheses 1 and 2 get at that. Urgent trials will come sooner after the prompt appears, at a lower interruption onset, as we termed it, and they will be delivered faster, at a lower interruption duration. Hypothesis 3 borrows from some sociological work by Goffman. In addition to understanding the timing of interruptions, I also wanted to know about word choice. Goffman coined the term access rituals, referring to the little verbal and nonverbal behaviors that we engage in when we're requesting social access to somebody. Things like saying "excuse me" or "hey" before speaking. We predicted that we would see more of these when interruptions were not urgent, that participants might take their time and make interruptions a little softer, if you will. In addition to these quantitative hypotheses, I also had a couple of qualitative research questions about people's strategies for interruption. To get at these, I included some open-ended research questions in a survey at the end of the experiment, asking participants, how did you decide when to deliver your message to your partner in urgent rounds? And how did you decide what to say to your partner in urgent rounds? As well as asking those same questions for non-urgent rounds. So what did we find? Well, first on the quantitative side, let's look at the interruption timings. On the interruption onset question, we found that people did indeed begin their utterance sooner when interruptions were urgent, as hypothesized. This effect was small, a mean difference of only a couple hundred milliseconds, as you see here, but this difference was significant. This fits with our understanding of multitasking prioritization, that we tend to do the urgent thing first, or as soon as possible, and that's what we observe people doing here. In the case of interruption duration, we didn't find any significant differences between urgent and non-urgent trials, a finding I'll talk more about later that was a little surprising to me. For access rituals, the excuse me's and hey's before speaking, we also didn't find any significant difference of urgency. This one I chalk up to the fact that, in general, most people never use these access rituals, but a few people use them almost every single trial. The use of access rituals online and in the interruption of ongoing tasks are both unstudied topics, so This finding might be a starting point for how we understand access rituals in those contexts, and how maybe we'll see them as largely individual mannerisms. I used mixed effects models to test these hypotheses, essentially fancy regression models that take individual differences into account. You can find the full models in the supplementary materials of my paper and an explanation of how mixed effects models work. Now let's take a look at the strategies people reported in the open-ended questions. We performed thematic analysis of participants' responses to those questions and ended up identifying 5 major themes of how people timed their interruptions. The first 2 are kind of the 2 extremes, either interrupting as soon as possible, prioritizing speed, or taking one's time, prioritizing accuracy. The next 2 themes involve some more decision making. Participants took into account either the Tetris task that they were interrupting, or the content of the message that they were delivering. Characteristics of the task might look like specific moments in the game, mirroring interruption literature about natural breakpoints, that there are some moments within a task that are better suited to multitasking than others. The fact that some participants sought these out in a task that other people were doing is really interesting to us. Allocentric breakpoint identification isn't something that's been studied much so far. Thinking about proactive assistance, this is really interesting. Do people have a set rule for when they interrupt? Does the task they're interrupting matter? What about the message that they're interrupting with? Well, it's messy. People report using a lot of different strategies. There's probably no such thing as interrupting like a human, per se, because people seem to have their own style and strategies. Likewise, when it comes to how people structure their spoken interruptions, we found a variety of strategies. Some participants focused on phrasing, trying to reduce the number of words they used or choose natural-sounding words, while others focused on how they delivered their speech, opting to speak more quickly or to speak particularly clearly. This made that null result about interruption duration pretty interesting to me, as people report trying to speak more quickly and with fewer words in urgent trials, but the strategy is not reflected in their observed behavior. Maybe these self-reported strategies just aren't that accurate, or maybe the differences in prosody that people produce are just so small that they don't make any significant difference quantitatively. Like in the timing strategies, we also saw people who adjusted their interruption structure based on what question they were asking. I didn't get much richness about what factors of the question lead to what priorities, but the fact that some participants took content into account is notable for proactive agent design. I also included a longer quote here in which a participant expresses regret for prioritizing clear delivery instead of short phrasing, and we get some great insight into the nature of continuous tasks here. This participant notes that trying to time things out based on the game is tricky, because interruptions take place over time, and the Tetris task continues, so a good moment to start an interruption might be a bad moment to still be speaking later on in the task. So what does this mean, and where do we go from here? Well, first of all, I'm pretty proud of my paradigm. This is a really lightweight way to generate spoken interruptions from people online, and it's flexible to different primary tasks other than Tetris, as well as different variables other than urgency. We also learned a few things that could impact how we design proactive agents. For one, urgency matters. Interruptions start sooner when interrupters believe them to be urgent. This is a concrete insight that proactive agent designers can apply right away. As for strategies, we saw just how diverse people can be and how they decide to interrupt others with speech. While some of these themes comport well with our previous understanding of multitasking, a lot of work still needs to be done to understand how people interrupt and how people like to be interrupted. One particular area of future work that interests me is natural breakpoints. Did my participants interrupt during the natural breakpoints of Tetris? It's a really tricky question to answer because we don't have a good way to model natural breakpoints in complex, ongoing tasks like this. I'm currently collecting data in a paradigm that looks like this, asking crowd workers to pick the best moment to interrupt a Tetris player by scrolling through screenshots of the same clips from the study that I presented here. Hopefully this time next year you'll get to hear me present a paper in which I answer that question of what natural breakpoints look like in a complex, continuous task like this, and whether people use those breakpoints to interrupt in this experiment. Here are some of the papers I referenced throughout this work. And I thank you very much for watching this presentation. You can get in contact with me on Twitter You can find the full text of the paper as well as publication details in the description of this video, and you can also find the code for my paradigm on my GitHub page, which is also linked in the description. Thank you very much.